Guys, today we're going to be taking a look at the Anamnesis seasonal bow. Now, this is a void lightweight bow that's not supposed to be dropping until Act 2, but Destiny is Destiny. Folks are actually getting the drops right now. Now, this bow is particularly interesting because it's a void lightweight bow. With it being a seasonal weapon, it has access to our seasonal mods, that being our fragile mod, which we'll discuss in our God roll portion of this video. But let me just say, it's a good time to be a weapon that's void this season. The artifact mods are juiced. Today we're going to be diving into the Anamnesis, going over what makes this bow so potent and why I believe this is going to be your next favorite weapon in the game. Now understand, guys, for those that are actually getting this bow to drop right now, that's currently a bug. It's not supposed to be happening, but with the launch of Act 2 coming literally next week, all of us are going to have the opportunity to focus target this with our Tome of Wants. Now let's begin. Starting with our column perks, in our third column, we have Archer's Tempo, Dragonfly, Successful Warmup, Hipfire Grip, Repulsor Brace, To the Pain, and finally, Perfect Floats. In column 4, we have Destabilizing Rounds, Demoralize, Adagio, Impulse Amplifier, Sword Logic, Moving Targets, and lastly, Explosive Head. Now, I know some of these are like pretty typical perk combinations. You're seeing that Repulsor Brace, Destabilizing Round roll. That one is a classic and so good this season. Outside of that, you have your more traditional routes. Archer's Tempo is a great perk in that third column, dropping that draw time with every precision hit. And considering that this is a lightweight bow, you can really drive down the draw speed for this bow, with Archer's Tempo drawing it down even further. Now, Successful Warmup is also present in that third column, and I like Successful Warmup, but keep in mind, you gotta get a kill in order to get that 37.5% decrease in draw time, whereas Archer's Tempo isn't quite as fast as Successful Warmup. It's still 25% though, and it only requires a precision hit. And in modes like GMs or anything that involves higher health targets where you're not always landing a kill with every shot, I prefer Archer's Tempo. Now, Dragonfly is also present in that third column, which is interesting because you essentially have a damage perk, or in this case, an AoE damage perk that you can combine with another damage perk in that fourth column, whether that be Dragonfly and Destabilizing Rounds or Dragonfly and Demoralize to get the weaken off. Tyranny of Heaven is one of my favorite bows in the game, and one of my favorite combinations for that bow is the combination of Dragonfly Incandescent. And I know a lot of people are like, Cross, why would you need two kabloomies? Fellas, why not?
Kaboom? Yes, Rico. Kaboom.
And that's essentially what you're getting here with Anamnesis, but in void form, which takes us to our fourth column perks. Demoralize is a new perk that was added to us this episode, and it states that on precision final blows, this causes nearby targets to become weakened. Now, that AoE is about 4 to 5 meters, and it's actually very similar to that of the Strand perk Tear. Now, there is a cooldown between activations of 1.5 seconds, but that can be decreased to 1 second with the enhanced version. I'm not gonna lie, guys, I have a really difficult time choosing between Demoralize and Destabilizing Rounds. I get the synergy here that Demoralize offers, the ability to weaken groups of ads from a single precision kill, the synergy it has with some of our artifact mods, which we're going to get into here in just a bit. No lie though, it's a tough decision, especially considering the glow up that Destabilizing Rounds got at the launch of Heresy, getting that void burst, getting that volatile off on multiple targets. The fact that we were supposed to only get volatile rounds for 2 seconds if any targets are hit with that burst, but in actuality is 5 seconds, makes it substantially stronger. On top of the internal cooldown being decreased from 4 seconds to 1.5 seconds, with the enhanced perk adding 0.75 seconds to the volatile rounds, the Destabilizing Rounds is no longer lagging behind its counterparts. Volt Shot, Incandescent, both good traits, but the Destabilizing Rounds is definitely in that S tier category. Now, if you didn't want to go the route of Void, maybe you don't care for kabloomies, maybe you don't care for Void synergy, what's wrong with you? There is Sword Logic here, which is an interesting choice. Not something we ever seen on a bow before. Essentially though, Final Blows grants the weapon a damage bonus, with the strength and duration of that bonus increasing when more powerful targets are defeated. So for instance, Miners gives you 1 stack for 15% for 5.5 seconds, Elites and Guardians give you 2 stacks for 25% or 20% inside of PvP. This lasts for 7.5 seconds, and Guardians in their super or mini bosses grants you 3 stacks. This is a 35% increase in damage, and this lasts for 10.5 15.5 seconds. And then finally, if you land a kill on a boss, this will give you 4 stacks, which is a 50% damage buff, which lasts for 15.5 seconds. And what are the chances you're actually going to be running around with 4 stacks? Not probable. On top of that, for the most part, you're just going to be killing minors. Nonetheless, still a good perk. Outside of that, if you want to go something more typical, you do have Explosive Head, which is also a solid perk. Now, with Anamnesis being an episodic weapon, this actually comes with the origin trait Willing Vessel. Dealing damage or defeating targets with this weapon gradually increases stability, handling, reload speed, and charge rate. Now, this effect gradually decreases over time, but it is gained more quickly when near allies. Now, what can be confusing here is that this origin trait states that it will increase charge rates, which normally makes you think of like swords or fusion rifles, things that actually have a charge rate. Now, stated by Bungie in the most recent developer livestream, this origin trait is also supposed to affect draw time. Granted, it doesn't seem like it's doing all that much. Now, Willing Vessel also increases our reload speed, which provides us a faster arrow knocking speed. Now, in our testing, what we found is that for a 580 draw time bow, it would take 35 frames to become fully drawn. However, at times 1 of the origin trait, that would go to 34 frames. And at times 2, that would go to 33 frames. Times 3 would be 32 frames, times 4, 31 frames, and times 5, 30 frames. Now, this was also confirmed by Mossy Max on X, where he tested it as well. And what he calculated was it to be somewhere around a 0.85 times draw time scalar. So again, what we thought initially was that this origin trait would have no effect on draw time, but that seems not to be the case. Now, we do have shiny variants of our weapons, which means they also get access to the origin trait Runneth Over if you're lucky enough to get it. This perk reads that reloading their allies overflows the magazines, bows receive faster draw time, and swords receive faster charge rates. Now, I love Runneth Over. I think it's a fantastic perk, especially for overflowing your magazine. Psycho Pomp, for instance, we talked about Runneth Over being the god roll for that weapon. Now, granted, it doesn't have the ability to overflow the magazine for your bow, as you can only just load 1 at a time, but it does drop your draw time. Now, before we move on to our god rolls, I'm going to touch on some other synergies that this bow can pull off, starting with our artifact mods. As most of you know, this is an artifact that leans heavily into both Arc and Void, and they're pretty potent. Starting with one of our favorites, we have Volatile Marksman. This mod reads that Rapid Void weapon precision hits and Rapid Void weapon final blows grants volatile rounds, with a boost that grants class ability energy on volatile detonations. Now, this only requires 2 crits with our bow, which is beautiful. Even without a void-specific perk like Destabilizing Rounds, you can still proc volatile rounds to provide some extra damage, to stun and bury your champions, or just to look sexier. Now, another option to run in combination with Anamnesis is Maligned Harvest. This says that rapidly applying Volatile causes your next instance of Void weapon damage to create a weakening burst. And the trigger for this mod is inflicting Volatile 4 times in rapid succession. And upon doing so, the next instance of Void weapon damage will create a weakening burst in a 5-meter radius. Now, this pairs perfectly with Volatile Marksman. It's essentially you're going to be providing yourself with volatile rounds very often, and if you went with, say, a destabilizing round roll in that 4th column, you're going to have even more volatile rounds on hand. Now, last but not least, we have Void Flux, bringing us full circle on these interactions. Void Flux states that defeating weakened targets with a Void weapon applies volatile to nearby targets. Powerful targets increase the radius of the explosion. So whether you're using Maligned Harvest, an ability, or even using Demoralize on your bow, this will provide you with an easily weakened target, which can then apply volatile in a very similar way to Destabilizing Rounds. TLDR, guys, use Void weapons. They're popping off this season, and on Anamnesis, they are absolutely deadly. Now, as we brought up before, these episodic weapons are part of the Heretical Arsenal, which takes us to our Adept and Shiny versions, as well as our fragile mods. The main one I want to touch on is Power of Resolve. This one says that rapid hits with this weapon creates a Taken Seeker projectile, strong against unstoppable champions. Now, these are almost like the Taken Blinded Seekers from the new exotic Barrow Dyad. When equipped on the bow, though, it took 2 rapid hits. However, the shots did need to be hit within 2 seconds, but that would proc the Seeker, which then tracks to the enemy that you were shooting at. Now, in our testing, it would sometimes track to other enemies in in the area, but you can't have it proc shooting into the air. It only procs when the enemy is hit with your bow shots. Now, because of this, most of the time that Seeker will just track to whatever you're shooting at. Now, it's pretty nice, guys. The extra damage there, it's like an extra 5,600 damage on regular ads, 2,800 on Carl. It's nothing breaking the bank, but you do have the ability to stun unstoppable champions. And considering that you can easily apply Volatile to this bow, you actually have a 2-in-1. So you've got a bow here with this Fragile mod, stunning unstoppable champions, and then Volatile stunning barrier champions. Something I really liked is that the Taken Seeker will actually keep the Volatile round buff and will make enemies volatile. So there's some nice void synergy that you can pull off here with this Fragile mod. But this takes us to what we believe is our PvE God roll. I think one of the best combinations you can get on this bow for both survivability and lethality is Repulsor Brace and Destabilizing Rounds. Both of these feed into each other. You've got one perk that's offering the kabloomies, another perk which is giving you an overshield based on those kabloomies. It's nice, and it's a combination we've been utilizing on a number of other void weapons. And for my folks that missed out on this perk combination during Solstice, the only other bow in the game that can roll with that combination is Fortunate Star. And I know most of you probably didn't even keep that bow. However, if you wanted to go the route of just more AoE damage, Dragonfly and Destabilizing Rounds offers some great void synergy on top of bigger explosions. Now, in our testing, I will say it was a bit difficult to tell what was actually spreading the volatile. Was it the volatile rounds itself or the AoE explosion for Dragonfly? Regardless, you're getting bigger explosions and more damage. And that's what you can accomplish with that Dragonfly Destabilizing Round combo. Outside of that, you could go Archer's Tempo's successful warm-up with Destabilizing Rounds. Again, I still lean more toward Archer's Tempo. And if you want to abandon Destabilizing Rounds and go for something that offers Weaken, you can do Dragonfly and Demoralize. Now, as for the strings and the arrow combo, typically I like to go with something that's going to speed up my draw time. You go with Elastic String for the +5 handling and that -80 draw time. However, you do lose accuracy. But if you want to keep your accuracy, you can offset it with Flexible String, which provides more handling, but only decreases your draw time by 40. Now, it does reduce your accuracy, but only by 5. Now, moving on to our arrow, we have Compact Arrow Shaft, which gives you that +10 reload speed and +10 handling. This will allow you to knock your arrow in faster, and in my opinion, it's the way to go. Now, do keep in mind that you cannot decrease your draw time past 500 milliseconds. For instance, you can't do something like Elastic String and a draw time masterwork. It will be capped at 500 milliseconds. The only thing that can get you below that 500 milliseconds are activation perks, whether that's Archer's Tempo, successful warm-up. Now, what we have not tested though is the Runneth over origin trait on this bow, as that does have an effect on draw time. Granted, we don't have the God roll to really see, does it go below the 500 milliseconds? I would assume so, but again, that's gonna require more testing once we get more rolls of this bow next week. What I will say though is that it should, considering that both Runneth over as well as Willing Vessel work off of scalars. Therefore, it's able to go past those limitations. We'll get a confirmation on that though as soon as we can. So guys, that is it. So far, it looks to be a pretty juicy bow. The biggest thing holding it back is that it is a lightweight bow, but keep in mind Bungie has been making tons of changes to this archetype, which has improved these bows substantially. And since we've had time to play with the bow, and you yourself have even seen it in action during the developer live stream, I believe Anamnesis is going to be a must-have. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.